We have to be careful here, because what that makes you feel is that every time you're ill, you're a negative person, or you've done something negative. And in fact, that's not accurate. So we have to get a softer attitude about this notion that all illness is the result of negativity. We have another belief, that true change is not possible. And this is a strong belief people have, that you can change the small things in your life, but you can't really change the big things. And that the real parts of yourself that you have to redo, etc., can't be changed. And part of the reason is because, again, as I said, in your gut, you know that if you make the kinds of changes that your healing requires, a lot more than your body's going to change. A whole lot more than your body's going to change. You're going to become an absolutely different person. And that difference can be more intimidating than walking through the disintegration of your body in an illness. That's how frightening it is. The thing you have to bear in mind is life is a learning experience. There is never a moment when we're not learning on this planet. Bear in mind that many of the lessons we learn, many of them, look like they're painful. But in fact, they're the greatest blessing we could ever have in our life. Absolutely ever had. And I share one of my favorite stories with you. I was doing a workshop in Amsterdam, and this gentleman who was in this workshop was in charge of taking me back to, I don't know, to the airport or something. I don't remember what it was. But you know how after you've taught a workshop and you've been on your feet for hours and days, whatever, the last thing you want to do is engage in a long conversation with someone. So I get in the car and he says, let me tell you about myself. And I'm like this, like, oh, please do. But actually, he told me one of the best stories I've ever had in the whole of my life on this planet. He says, let me tell you about my life. He said that he had two business partners. And the three of them owned two companies. One company was fairly useless, and the other one was the one they were in. So one day he goes to work, and his two partners outvoted him. They said, we've decided we don't want to work with you anymore. And so what they did was they said, you have a choice. You can either take all this stock in this worthless company, or you can take the equivalent of $35,000. And he said to me, all the stock in a worthless company, or $35,000. He said that 35 grand was not going to either get me out of debt or help me pay my bills, and then there's this. And he said he didn't know what to do. He was beside himself. So he goes home, and he wants to tell his wife, and he says, I got to talk to you. She says, I want to talk to you. I want a divorce. All in one day. All right? So everyone divorced him in one day, or announced their intention to divorce him. So he said to me, now I'm not a spiritual man, at least I wasn't then. And he said, but I finally stood back and I said, there's only one thing, one source that could mess up my life like this, and it had to be God. So he decides to say a prayer, and he says, if you're there and you have anything to do with this, talk to me. He has a dream. And in the dream, he sees himself as driving this car, and he's going over the Alps, and it's real icy and it's real snowy, and he's clinging to this car. He's got to hold on for dear life, but eventually he makes it over the top, and he drives down, and the road is beautiful, and it's dry, it's sunny, and he drives the car to a beautiful little house where there's a candle in the window and a meal waiting on the table inside. And from that he deduces that he should take all the stock in this useless company because this is a cat food company, and he was driving a Jaguar. So he tells his partners that he wants the stock, and they said absolutely. They're laughing because they think they've just saved themselves $35,000. Well, within 6 months to a year's time, he had this company turned around, and now he's one of the most generous entrepreneurs in Europe because it just simply exploded for him. And he met another life's partner. And he moved on. He's got a gorgeous marriage, and he has a beautiful life. But what he was able to do was not hold on to the wounds. Now, if he had done that, I don't believe, although you can't prove this, that his future would have ended up this way, because he'd still be saying, why did you do this to me? Instead, he said, all right, you did it to me, I'm out of here. All right? And he took his circuits of energy, and he just took off. Now, there's another thing I want to point out here that's really delicious to point out, and that's that when you heal, and in the healing process, you're going to recognize that healing requires a number of things. And we've talked about that. Healing requires, of course, paying attention to your wounds and going into forgiveness, etc., but it also requires honor. It requires a sense of personal honor. And I never realized that till I wrote the book Anatomy of the Spirit. I never realized the role that integrity and honor play in healing, especially with yourself. If you give your word to yourself, you've got to keep it. Don't negotiate your honor, because you know what? It affects your immune system, it affects your biology, and I'm not kidding you. So, how does one forgive? And how do you manage yourself and your healing? I'll tell you when we return. Thank you. I think the most important thing, the most important point I can give you to go away with is the 5 steps to healing, because you need to know what to do. Now that I told you where you lose your spirit, what are you going to do about it? First thing you want to know is you have to force yourself to forgive. You are never, ever going to want to do it. So you get, no, it's true. So what you need to realize is at some point it's got to occur to you that this is hurting you a lot more than it is them. And that's all there's to it. You will never really want to do it until after you've done it. And that's the funny part about it. You'll never know how precious and how good that feels until after you've done it. That's the first thing. The second thing is you have to redefine healing for yourself. Instead of thinking that healing is perfection, think of healing as a day-to-day life journey. It is not reaching a goal where your body is perfect and your mind is perfect and your childhood is perfect and your tomorrow is perfect. Get out of healing as perfection model, because that's not going to do you any good, and it won't work, and you'll never get there. So instead, think of healing as an everyday task that you have to live with, and redefine it as not perfection, but your capacity to walk every day through the challenges that are in your life. And sometimes if the challenges are an ill body or a depressed system, a depressed mental or emotional state, nevertheless, use it as a way to say, I've got to heal today, I'm healing, I'm always healing, and look at it as a continuation. Another thing is stop asking for the reasons why things happen as they do. Give that up. I mean, so many people get to that point and they say, I will not at all move forward with this situation in my life until I know why things happen as they do. And you lock your heels in and you clench your jaw, and nothing ever moves forward for you at all in your life. And I'm telling you something, that's a dangerous position to be in. It's very dangerous because your spirit does not move on, and neither does your life. And you never get anything back, and you never do anything else. Chart a course for the future. Chart a course. Make sure, which is the next step in healing, is to chart that course and make sure it is far away from the wound you're using. Okay? See yourself, create another life path for yourself. Imagine yourself in another direction, and literally force yourself to do that. Okay? And the last step, which is the same thing I witnessed with Chet LaHaye, which is to sit around and have people witness your wound 3 times. And that's it. Don't go overboard. Don't use anything else. It's 3 times. 3 times and you're done. And literally watch yourself, watch what happens after that. Don't let yourself slip into passages in which you find yourself needing more and more support. Now remember, certain things will take support, like, for example,